My name is Maryam Alavi, Dean of Scheller College, and I'm delighted that you could join us this morning to this very exciting program on women's leadership and in celebration and observation of International Women's Day. International Women's Day is a day to honor and celebrate the achievements of women around the world and recognize their contributions in all fields of study, industry, and society. Today we are joined by three esteemed women leaders as our panelists for a discussion on women's issues and insights gained along the path to leadership. I will now take a few minutes to introduce our panel members, and we'll then ask them to join me on stage. You have seen on their very impressive bios online and in the printed programs, so I will be very brief in my introduction. In alphabetical order, I have Beth Cabrera. She is the founder of Cabrera Insights and author of Beyond Happy, Women, Work, and Well-Being. And as a writer, researcher, and speaker, she helps individuals achieve greater success and well-being. Her leadership development programs focus on strength, meaning, mindfulness, and workplace well-being. Beth holds a PhD in organizational and industrial psychology from Georgia Institute of Technology, and after a number of very successful university teaching research positions in Madrid, Spain, and the US, in 2009, she founded Cabrera Insights, the leadership development company that I referred to. And the company helps individuals and leaders apply principles of positive psychology for enhanced engagement and performance. Dr. Cabrera's course, titled How to Build a Thriving Workplace, A Leader's Guide, can be found at the greatcourses.com and on audible.com, so if you want to listen to that. And you can also view her TED Talk and read her blog at cabrerainsights.com. Next, we have Carolyn Gibbs. Carolyn is the head of Global Investments, Global Investments Engagement at Invesco, and she's a member of the Global Investments Council and serves on the investment executive team. She's responsible for the Global Investors Forum, a key networking and collaboration for Invesco's diverse investment teams. She's a founding member of the Invesco Women's Network and currently serves on its Global Governance Committee as co-chair of the North American Management Committee. Carolyn earned a BA in English from Texas Christian University and an MBA in finance from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. And she's also a chartered financial analyst. Finally, we have Shally Panicoat. Shally is the Senior Vice President and Chief Information and Digital Officer at WellStar Health System. I must add that Shally is also one of our executive MBA program at Scheller College. As a senior executive at WellStar, Shally is responsible for providing strategic direction, healthcare innovation, and leadership of the Information Technology and Digital Technology Division. She is an accomplished IT executive with over 20 years of experience in leading business growth initiatives. In addition to her day job and in addition to going to school full-time, she is a chairwoman for the Freedom Council for the Alliance for Freedom, Restoration, and Justice, which is a nonprofit organization comprised of coalition of businesses across the globe who have come together to fight to end human trafficking and protect the vulnerable. Panelists, please join me on stage and let's give them a warm Scheller College welcome. Okay, thank you again for taking time from your very busy schedules to come join us this morning. So the process I'm going to follow, I'm going to start by asking panelists the question. And please feel free to come in. Don't wait for your turn. If there's something you want to share, please feel free to do that. And also, then we will leave plenty of time at the end for questions from the audience. So let me start by asking you the question that you're all very successful leaders and in your respective fields. And what does leadership mean personally to you? And in your mind, what is the essence of good leadership? And Beth, let me start with you.
Okay, thank you for having me. I have to put a plug in for positive leadership at the beginning. So I will say that the very best leaders, I believe, are people who create positive environments where everyone can thrive. And that's because when we're thriving, we're more successful. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that the essence of leadership is to help others succeed. So, but I'll also go back and say when I started teaching as a college professor 25 years ago, I was teaching leadership courses. And there was my favorite theory. There were lots of theories that I taught, but my favorite theory was path-goal theory of leadership. And it's pretty simple, but it basically says that leaders have two goals, two things that they should be doing. And the first is to clarify the goal, and they need to be communicating what the mission is, why we're doing what we're doing, and what even the individual role expectations are. That needs to be very clear and constantly communicated. And then the next step is to clear a path. So a leader's job is to clear a path so that people can achieve those goals. And that's providing resources, removing barriers, and I would add now creating a more positive workplace. So I think that's what leaders do. I guess today you could think of it more as like the servant leadership that we talk about. How can I serve you so that you can be successful? And that makes a leader successful.
Thank you. Great, yeah. Carolyn.
I would pick up on that. I think that's spot on. And what I would observe is that leaders are leaders because people choose to follow them. And the really excellent leaders that I've observed in my career are the ones who set clear objectives. There's a lot of noise out there, but they keep you focused on the objectives. They keep you focused on what's really important. And then they identify the things that individual contributors can do to achieve those objectives. So they really use the skills of their people well and help those people in achieving the collective objectives of the firm. So I think that my observations come from my experience, but it's interesting to hear kind of from a academic version. I think that they mesh very well.
That's great.
Well, first I want to thank you for the opportunity. What a great topic that we're covering here. So for me, I would say, very similar to what has been already shared, but it's mostly, for me, it's about making a positive difference, right? And I think leaders are incredibly fortunate and privileged to be where they are, to be in a position of influence. It's about lifting people up, right? And it is about doing what's right for the company and the success of the organization, all that. But it's just as much about making more leaders, not followers, right? Just focus on building more leaders. And that comes with intentionality. You have to focus on the people around you. And how many times we have worked for leaders, in the past where they're just incredible leaders because they do a phenomenal job at managing up, but they barely exist in many ways towards the teams who count on them, right? And so being able to appreciate that ecosystem around you, those who make you look good every day as a leader, and lifting them up and helping them succeed and making a positive difference is by far the most, I would say, essential element of a good leader for me. And every morning when I wake up, when I come to work, I see they're just incredibly smart people, smarter than me in many ways. And I think that if I'm just so humbled to be in a place to make an impact in their lives and enable them to be successful. And that mindset, I think, is essential.
That's great. So my next question is, who had the biggest impact on your career? Why and how? And let me start with you, Carolyn.
When I looked back on my career, and tried to identify maybe one or two people who really had a significant impact. It was tough to do because there have been so many people that have influenced me along the way and helped me along the way. And, you know, I go back to starting with my family and my parents and encouraging. I have two older brothers, and they encouraged us to do whatever we wanted to do, but whatever it is, do it well and work hard and constantly learn. And so we have very diverse careers. I have a brother who's an engineer, one who's a graphic designer, and I ended up in finance. But I think that spurring that constant curiosity, I think, served me well throughout my career. And then along the way, there were others who helped. And so, you know, I look back and there have been numerous people who have helped me along the way, whether they were professors or supervisors or bosses. But just, you know, I think when I look back, there were so many people who were generous with their time, generous with their views and their advice. And that's a lesson to me to make sure I'm doing that for the next generation.
Very good. Beth, how about you?
Again, many people along the way, but I think there's one person at the very beginning of my career who had probably the biggest impact, and that's the woman who hired me into my first job when we moved to Madrid, Spain. She was the director of the Department of Management. She hired me, and I did not even speak Spanish yet. I was just starting to learn Spanish, so thank you, Isabel, for doing that. And then she continually gave me opportunities. She was a real sponsor, not just a mentor. She was a sponsor in that she was able to put me in positions that advanced my career. And the very first thing she did the first year was made me the secretary of the department when, again, I was learning Spanish. So not sure why she did that, because I would frantically try to take notes and then write up the minutes in Spanish and send them to her, and I'm sure she had to rewrite the entire thing every time. So you know, it was nice of her to put me kind of in a leadership role at the beginning, but and then she, you know, a few years later asked me to teach a PhD class. That was a big step in my career, and organizational behavior, which was something I was passionate about. A few years later, she appointed me as the director of the PhD program. And every single time she asked me to do something, my answer was, no, I can't do that. Every time, you know, she believed in me so much more than I believed in myself. And even after I left and was a professor at Arizona State, she stepped down from editing a journal, and she appointed me as her successor in editing the Journal of Management Research. So she just continuously gave me opportunities and encouraged me and told me I could, and I'm forever grateful for that.
That's great. So
that was great.
Not only she was a sponsor, she was a champion. So
Yeah, she really was.
that's what. Great, Shelley.
Yeah, I would love to answer that question, because, you know, when you say it's an International Women's Day, you know, I have to sort of bring that international element to this, my story. So I grew up in India, and I came to the United States when I was barely 21 years old. And I had this just big dream, right, in like many immigrant story, and I wanted to make it big and I aspired to have a very strong career, but, you know, I was brand new to this country, no connections, no network. English wasn't my first language. So I started my career at that, you know, sort of starting with that sort of recipe, which is not what I see around me, right? Especially in technology, they're mostly men, and so I look around and I don't necessarily see people like me around me. And so I used to sit back and still think about, like, what is it that I needed to do to be where I am? And early on in my career, perhaps, I started to sort of look at the individuals around me and start to think, well, that's what I need to do. And clearly that's not what I need to do. I need to be myself. But I just take a step back to say, in that journey from where I started, you know, just brand new to this country, to becoming the first woman executive in technology at a Fortune 30 company, and then this was Anthem, and then left to Wellstar, being the first woman CIO. And that career, I think, if I owe a lot of that to just one person, that would be my father, how I was raised. You know, I grew up in a culture where it's quite male dominant, especially at that time. But he always helped me find my voice. He was very focused on building that, you know, find your voice and speak up, and, you know, just sort of be there in the moment and find your voice. And that thought process sort of always helped me, instill that confidence. But like you said, there are so many other individuals throughout the career where they said, well, she can do it. I think she has what it takes to get it done. Put me in rooms and meetings that I wanted to be in, but if they did not open the door, I would never be there. So I owe my career to a lot of individuals, leaders, male leaders as well, who've done a lot of that uplifting and helping me find my career. But I would say ultimately it goes back to childhood, especially for me and as a woman.
Great stories, great variations in the story. So my next question is, and I'm going to jump all over the place in terms of the type of questions I'm going to ask. Women seem to be nowadays relatively well represented in mid-level management positions. But if you sort of look at senior levels, C-suite, and particularly on corporate boards, then the gap between men and women widens a lot. Why do you think that is, and what can be done to address the issue? And, I'm going to stay with you, Shelly. So,
sure. Yeah, listen, the C-suite leadership, it just doesn't happen overnight, right? I believe that in most cases, organizations invest in them. It's a nurturing process. It is an investment and capital investment organizations make in those individuals. And they're intentional about it, right? They know high talent, and they pick those high talent individuals and nurture them and give them opportunities. Unfortunately, in many cases, while there is a lot of focus on this topic in sessions and topics that they discuss, there is not a set list of goals that these senior executives are held to, where you need to give opportunity, not just for women, but diversified talent in your organization to give them complex projects. In my case, give them opportunity to have high visible projects. Give them a priority as long as they qualify for jobs. Internally, and being that I would say focused and very clear set goals from top down. I think in many organizations that's missing. And it starts to unfortunately show when they start to move from mid-level to senior. But the other aspect is, I think there is a mindset, and I hope it's changing, but that the balance between having a successful family as well as a successful career, they're somewhat mutually exclusive, and they're not. Right? And it does take a lot of individuals around you to support you, but if we can change that mindset early on, especially in girls and women and early on in their career, I don't think they would make some of the decisions they've made, where with that mindset, even before they enter that phase in their life, they're making decisions to choose careers that would not necessarily conflict. And I think we need to start early and change that mindset.
Very interesting point. Yeah.
I completely agree with you on the goals. And I will say, even just observing at Invesco, we set goals for the firm in 2017 to reach 30 to 40% of our senior women, or senior employees as women. And it's amazing how setting a goal really focuses the firm on making change. And so we started, I think we were at 27%, we're now at 32%. And we're still focused on that. But it's not only did we set the goals, we set kind of parameters around how we were going to do that. So we said we will have female participants on interview panels. We will make sure that we've got female candidates. And if we don't have female candidates in a pool of people that we're interviewing for a job, send it back and look for some more. We've made sure that if we've got groups of people from different departments working on projects, make sure there's diverse representation on those projects. If you make it front of mind and you make it a conscious effort, it's amazing what you can do, and you can move the needle. And I would say, it is very much top of mind in our executives' minds and in our senior leaders' minds, and that is making a difference. I would say there are other things you can do, like HR policies, whether it's parental leave, including that, but also making sure that the guys take parental leave. It's not just the women that you need to encourage on the parental leave side. We've got to get more balance in the way we view these things. And so there are policies that we can put in place, flex time, other things like that we can put in place that make it much easier to raise families and to encourage men to be part of that equation.
Beth?
Yeah, I completely agree. Both of you mentioned the goal setting, and we have a great example of this because you have to be intentional about it. And Unilever, I just tweeted an article yesterday that they have just announced that they have achieved gender balance globally across 14,000 managers. And they did that very intentionally. They set a goal, and it has to be a specific goal. They want gender balance, gender equality. They appointed diversity and inclusion champions across the world to work on this. So it's one thing to have the goal, you got to measure it, and you got to hold people accountable. They also did that. They tracked the record of senior leaders to see how many women they were promoting, and they gave them the feedback. And they were extremely intentional about not just having the goal, but achieving that goal and making sure that it happened, and people were held accountable. So I think that has to happen, or we're not going to see this. And that's because this is happening really due to unconscious bias. There are stereotypes still, and people make decisions without understanding what's behind those decisions, and there's discrimination based on stereotypes and bias. So that's why you have to be intentional about the goals. Something that's very exciting to me is the research that's being done looking at, you mentioned having diverse pools of candidates. You've got to not only, every time there's a position open or a promotion, you need to have a pool of minorities and men and everyone that you're looking at. And Iris Bonet is a behavioral economist at Harvard, and she's done great research on this, showing that if you have a pool of people, they call it bundle decisions. So every time a decision is being made about promotion, you must have a group of people and to look at. And when you're evaluating a group of people, what happens is the people making those decisions look at performance, and they're looking at the relative performance of the people in this group. That eliminates the bias, because what we find out is when you have a single individual, that's when they use stereotypes. So just by bundling the decisions, you're reducing these stereotypes. And just a quick story about what she did. She actually presented her results in a talk to the Nobel Prize Committee. And historically, Nobel Prizes have been given to men. So the year after she gave that presentation in 2018, for the first time, they started using bundling, and they insisted on having a diverse pool of nominations for every different prize they were giving. And they gave that year in 2018 2 female scientists the Nobel Prize, and the Nobel Peace Prize went to a female. So it's very exciting that we're finding ways to try to get around these. Yeah. And I just have to add one more thing. I'm concerned that the data does not support the idea that women are doing okay in middle management either. So there's this, McKinsey Lean In does a survey every year on working women, and the results of the last one came out in November. And they're calling this problem the broken rung problem. And they're showing that women, the problem is the very first rung of the ladder. The very first step into management is when women are falling behind. So the data shows 48% women in entry-level positions, and then across the board, the average going into the first level of management, it drops to 38%. And then it goes down and down and down to 21% in the C-suite. But unfortunately, it's happening at the very beginning. So we need to address it, from the very first level of management, have a goal there to get more women in, and then go from there.
So it's interesting that maybe going back to one of the issues that were brought up, that it could be possibly a hypothesis that women are kind of stepping back from positions that in their minds is going to be intense or have a lot of responsibility, because at certain ages they are really thinking and focused more on having a family, most of them, not all, of course. So that may be a combination, a confluence of various environmental, structural issues in the organization, as well as just people thinking in their minds and concluding that, well, it's an either-or kind of thing. If I want to have a great family, have more than one child or something, then I better not go to career paths that are going to be very demanding of my time and effort. So it'll be interesting to look at some of the underlying factors. Carolyn, did you all responded to that question, right?
Yeah.
Good. So the next question is, talking about work-life harmony and balance. how do you individually go about work-life balance, or better yet, the new term, work-life integration? So how do you go about doing that?
You want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, especially now that I've embraced this EMBA program here. It is.
That humbles
I
me.
think it's testing me. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It humbles me because she's working full-time at a very responsible position and going to school full-time. So that's amazing. So yeah, you need to really talk about that.
It is testing me for sure, but I think the short answer is I don't think there is necessarily a balance where you're a superstar across the board. And I think understanding that and sort of being kind to yourself, I think is very important for highly ambitious women who want to be great at your job and being a great mom and being a great community leader and being a great friend and colleague. I mean, it just goes on. And I just think we need to recognize that. But I do think being in the moment is an important feedback or guidance I've received early on in my career. What I mean by that is we cannot be everywhere, and we need to be in the moment when we can be. So what I tend to do is how I sort of balance my life and the best I can, and I've created these circles of, I would say, priorities around me. And there's one circle of priority where, for me as an individual, if my family is out of balance, it's going to impact me across the board, right? I can't compartmentalize it. So then what do you do to keep that intact? And that is a very, I would say, focused effort, as in planning events ahead of time and not getting carried away when other moms are there for lunch every Friday and I'm not showing up at all for weeks, but I am there for her piano recital. So my point is being very thoughtful and tapping into your support system. It starts with whether it's your nanny or whether it's your spouse or whether it's your friend. It's very important to tap into that system to help you throughout that process. So I just say all that to say I don't think there's necessarily a fine balance, but it is important to sort of take that step and be in the moment and be there as best as you can and make the best use of it.
Great. Carolyn?
So I'm not great at this. I'll just tell you that right now. But that's my choice. And so I think the thing that you have to realize is you make choices in life. Mm-hmm. And there's different parts of your life will have different importance at different times. And you have to make decisions about that, and you have to own those decisions. And so, you could look back on my career and say she had no work-life balance, but that was my choice. And I was loving what I was doing, and I was excelling at it. And I had peers who were having families too, and not to say I've got a portfolio manager who's a colleague that I worked with for a long time. She has 3 kids. So in this industry, it is very much possible to have a family and be a portfolio manager. But I didn't get married till late in life, so I don't have children. I have a wonderful husband who does everything at home, and I am just blessed with that. But we're a team, and we view it as a team. And so we work very much together, and we make decisions together, and we're a partnership. And that's a choice we've made. He retired when we got married. As I said, I was late in life. But we made a decision that was the best for us, that he would retire and kind of take over all the household responsibilities. And I am extremely appreciative for that. And he makes what I do possible right now. So I think, you make choices together with your partner. And there are different times in your life when different things will be important. And so I think, it's never going to be in perfect balance.
Right.
And you're going to have to take it day to day, and you're going to have to make choices. And I think living in the moment, asking for help, learn how to ask for help. And that will help you manage things over your career.
If I can just add one more point to what you said. Something I've learned fairly recently is just buy what you can buy, right? In other words, if you can, I used to be hard on myself. Oh, I had to clean too, and that's how. I mean, you just sort of continue to get into the cycle, and now I pause and I think about, can I just buy the service, and does that help me kind of take care of one issue?
Right.
Well, yeah, because I cannot buy being a parent, right? That's something I have to do, and nobody else will do that for me. So, sort of being very thoughtful about it.
That's right.
It's something I've done.
Pick where you want to spend your time.
That's right.
And then if you don't want to spend your time on cleaning the house, pay somebody else to do that.
Wonderful tips. Beth, you wrote a book about this. So.
Yes, they actually took the two things that I was going to say, you've both mentioned, and so I'm in complete agreement here. I would say prioritize and presence. So I think it's extremely important to think about very carefully what matters most. And it could be your family, it could be your career, and that can change at different points in your life. But even at the time that you're doing both, you're not going to be able to do everything at work. You're not going to be able to do everything at home or with your family. So take some time to say, what are the most important things that I want to do at work? And then put those on the calendar, talk to your family about it, say, this is important to me. I'm going to do these things. And do the same thing at home and say, you could even talk to kids who are a certain age and say, I can't make every one of your sports events or plays, but I want you to tell me at the beginning of the year what this year is the most important thing to you. And I'm not going to be there for everything, but what matters most, I'm going to put on my calendar now at work, and they're going to see it, and they're going to know these things matter, and I'm going to do that. Because what happens is the urgent always overtakes the important. And that's when you get a sense of a lack of balance, but a lack of integration, a lack of harmony when you're not able to do what really matters. So I think prioritizing and being very protective about what matters most at work, what matters most at home, and at least doing those things and knowing you're not going to do everything, but you're going to do what matters most. And then the presence piece, I actually being present, fully present in each moment. So when you're at work, be at work. It's not easy. Try not to think about home because you can't do anything about it right now, so be at work. And when you're at home, when you're with family, when you're with loved ones, when you're at yoga, be there. And don't bring work there. And this is something I never was able to do. I was terrible at it. In the end of my TED Talk, I give a story about taking the kids to the playground. And being a professor was great because I had flexibility. I could work anywhere. I could always be reading articles or working on my articles or working on my class. But that meant I was working all the time. And I took the kids to the playground, and I took my articles and my highlighter, and I worked the whole time. I was not with them. And that's sad. I wish I had been with them. I wish I had been present when I was at home. So I think being present is also. I will add one last thing, that there is one thing that has been the greatest thing that has happened in my life as far as achieving harmony, and that was becoming an empty nester. So it was like overnight, our last one went off to college, the mommy guilt disappeared. I was like, I can, travel, I can work late.
That's the reward.
It really helps.
That's the reward of many years of hard work to get them off to college. So my next question is sort of having you reflect back on your own career and life, and what was a big challenge for you, either professionally or personally in life? How did you overcome that? How did you cope and manage it? So, Shally.
Yeah, I think there are two key reflections for me. One is, I was raised how we're raised in many ways, right? So my mindset coming to this country, in particular, that age that I was in, I was trained to be nice. I don't know if I can say it differently, and so there was a part of me, maybe perhaps a little in an unbalanced way, focused on being liked, the better way, And I think women, and I think I'm fair in saying that women tend to be that way more than perhaps the men I've worked with. So I had this incredible mentor, my boss, who's a tough guy to work for because he will tell you the way it is, and that's the gift of feedback, right?
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate. At that moment, I may not have felt that way, but as I look back, he did give me a gift.
It's called tough love, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so he said, Shallie, your job is not to be popular. Your job is to do what's right. And I would never forget that. And for me, that happened early in my career, right? And I think it's important because you can make mistakes early in your career, or I guess you can find opportunity to improve early in your career because you're not going to fall that deep at that time in your career. So, and for me, I had that blessing, I would say. And I started to look for what is my voice? What is it that I'm compromising by being nice or coming across that way? And I started to look around, and men do a phenomenal job at this, you know. So there were several great examples where I started to notice people with very strong voice in the room. And why do you say they have a strong voice? Because they are able to, one, be articulate, but two, they have a clear goal, and they know what they're talking about, and it's not, I would say, influenced necessarily by sort of the feelings, but it's influenced by objective facts. And that was, to me, a great learning. And so from then on, and later on, especially I just moved from Anthem to WellStar just a year ago, and they say, Shallie, you're just so tough and candid. And I'm just thinking, you have no idea. Because it's, you train early on in your career. Tough in the sense they're saying, you're a straight shooter, you say it the way it is. And I take that as a compliment. So that's one. The other areas, I think I touched on this, but being authentic. Like I mentioned earlier, people who are successful around me in my career journey, very successful men mostly, and there's no way I'm going to be like that person. And if I try to be like that person, then I already lost my niche and my differentiation. Yeah. And it took me a while to learn that, but again, the minute I knew, okay, this is what I'm good at and this is why I'm in this room, that actually kind of builds that confidence in you, and then people see through that. They know when you're authentic and when you're not. And I think leaders need to be authentic for others to follow you, and that's been a great learning for me as well.
So let me kind of have a follow-up question to ask you. When you decided that, as you described it, I don't want to be popular, I just need to say it the way it is, what was other people's reaction toward that, particularly men?
That's a great question. I think I talked about having a voice in the room. Mm. I think you quickly realize they're pausing, they're listening to you, they're taking you more seriously. And it's not, I don't want to come across like being tough, and there's a fine line there. I don't think you need to be tough and sort of aggressive. That's not the point. But if they know you know what you're doing, and they know, and this is not just men, I think people around you, period. And then they know you know what you're talking, you mean business, and you're focused and you're driven, and once you build that trust, it's an amazing propeller, to your career. And they pause and they listen. And I don't think in many, you talked about unconscious bias, I don't think it's intentional in many ways, men thinking, oh, she is talking, I just have to. That's not the goal. It's just that you have to find your place, and you have to be present, and you have to sort of build a brand around you.
You have to earn it, obviously.
Yes,
absolutely, absolutely.
And I think your point about being fact-based, focus on the objective, don't make it personal. I think you can be direct that way. It's not about being personal. It's about getting the job done. And I think the more people can realize that's what you're trying to accomplish, the better off you are.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, now, Carolyn, let's continue on that same question.
So in terms of a challenge, and I relay this story because I think it shows the need to be adaptable and to be ready for change, because we are in a world of incredible change. And when I started my career, I worked for an investment management firm out of college, and worked for 6 years at that firm, 5 years for an international equity fund. And I loved it. And when I started, they handed me a telephone and said, buy yen. and I bought yen that day, and that was my first day on the job, and then just continued to do more and more in that team. And then I realized I needed to go back to school. So I had started my MBA at night, and then I thought, you know what, I want to go back full time. So I went back, I got my MBA in finance at the Wharton School. I came out, I'd started my CFA. Everything was working perfectly, except I graduated into my second recession, and no one was hiring. No one was hiring. And I interviewed with people, and in the investment management world, teams are small. They stick together for long periods of time, and one of the things clients look for is a closely knit team who's worked together for a long time. They've got a long track record, so there's not a lot of turnover. And so I was looking for a job and had talked to lots of people, but just nobody was hiring. And so I had a number of people say, well, would you like to switch to the sales side? You know, we could accommodate you in the sales side. And I thought, you know what, if I get to the sales side, I will never get back into the investment management side. So I kept looking, and Northwest Airlines had just done an LBO, a leveraged buyout. And they were hiring people from other airlines. They were hiring people from consulting firms. They hired about 70 people straight out of business school, entry-level type people to set up capital planning and financial planning and yield management and all this stuff that they didn't have before. And I thought, you know what? That's where I'll learn the most. And it will be useful if I'm ever on the portfolio management side again. I will have built some skills that I can really take to that effort. So I went to work for an airline that was on the brink of bankruptcy. I sat across from the guy who kept the financial model because they had tons of debt. And he would run the model that would say, we're going to make our interest payments this month, or we're not going to make our interest payments this month. And when he would say we aren't, we would go into execution mode and start cutting costs. But I learned so much in 11 months at that job. And then I got a phone call, and somebody said, hey, you want to come down and work for me on the fixed income side? I need an analyst. And so it worked out. But at the time, I was thinking, oh, my whole life plan is messed up, and what am I going to do now? And that's going to happen to you. And so just look for the best opportunity where you're going to learn the most and have a plan B, and then maybe you'll have a chance to get back on track at some point. But it worked out beautifully, and I learned things about running companies and company management that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. And so it was a really, really good experience.
Great. Beth?
So without a doubt, the most challenging thing I've ever faced personally and professionally was moving to Spain before I spoke Spanish and starting my career there. It was very, very difficult, and I felt like, you know, it's hard to start your career anyway, and first year as a college professor, and you're preparing classes from nothing, and you're trying to learn how to do research and what you have to do to get tenure. And then I felt like I was at such a disadvantage because I'm doing this and couldn't speak the language. You know, I kept thinking, I mean, you know, just preparing my classes, it took me at least 10 times longer to prepare every class than it did anyone else. and going to talks and I was trying to read articles in Spanish and start writing in Spanish because they wanted you to do that too and demonstrate. So I just felt like it was scary enough thinking, will I be successful? Would I get tenure? Will I be okay? And then having such a disadvantage in trying to do that was extremely challenging. And having gotten through it, and then it's great because you're like, I can do anything. Like, it does. Once you do something that is that challenging, it sets you up for success and builds a self-confidence, I think, in the future. And the other big challenge I think that I faced in my career was kind of moving from academia to starting my own business, my leadership development company, because it's a totally different world. and even the way you teach has to be very, very different, much more entertaining, much more, I mean, the things that, you know, a company is going to hire me, you know, to teach or to be a keynote speaker is not what you needed to teach undergrads at a university. So building that business and then the business development piece, I mean, it was great. I realized as a college professor, you know, every semester they're like, you have class Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10:30, and then on Thursday and Friday, and, you know, and all of a sudden I'm like, I have to find work. So, you know, and those are things that I had never learned to do. So that was challenging as well and intimidating. And but again, you learn and grow when you do things that challenge you. So.
Well, great stories of resilience and success. So let me now stop here and open it to the audience. There are some mics that are going to be going around. So questions? in front.
Hello. My name is Daphne Svedra. I am a prospective student for the MBA program. And I had a question so I just moved here like 2 years ago from Pittsburgh. And so I came down here not really knowing the Atlanta scene too much. I just wanted to explore. But I also work remotely for work. So I was wondering if you have any organizations or networking opportunities for somebody like me that might help further along my career by either, women's groups or, other organizations that would help.
I'm happy to take the question because, just 4 years ago I moved to Atlanta. Not necessarily, in the same phase that you were in, but similar thought, right? I'm moving to a brand new city. And I want to establish myself in the city, both career-wise, but also give back to the community and be involved in it. So what do I do? So I have a couple of thoughts for you. First and foremost, this is the city to be in, and I mean it. There is, if you wanted to be involved in community gathering and networking events, you could keep yourself busy, like 3 days a week or 5 days a week if you wanted to. That is so much happening. So very soon you'll find out it's about being intentional about which ones you want to be associated with. But a great source would be Women in Tech. I don't know if you're a technologist. Yes, good. So Women in Technology is a great forum. I'm happy to get you plugged in. I'm very active in that space. But that's a great way to get involved, and they do a lot of, networking events, but they're also there to support you for your career aspirations. So that's a great forum. There are other I would say groups like TechBridge. That's a great cause. I know they do a lot for individuals who are not as privileged as we are in pursuing their careers, and they do a lot of giving back. That's a great way to get involved and while empowering others. And there are many other forums. I'm happy to reach out to you. Just reach out to me through LinkedIn. But I would just leave you with this thought. This is the city to be in. And once you get involved, it's a close network in many ways. Although there are several networks, you just start to sort of interact with similar people.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I would add, if you have an interest in investment management or wealth management, the CFA Society of Atlanta is an interesting group to get to know, and you don't have to be a CFA to join. So that's another avenue.
So I am a research administrator here at Georgia Tech, but I have acquired so many other skills. Operations, program management, but it's so easy to get pigeonholed into one position or career. How do you break out of that to show that you can do something else other than what you've been doing for years? Have you ever had that experience?
So I would say build relationships with people around you, particularly if you see a spot that you have an interest in. Take that person to lunch. Have a conversation about what roles are available in that area, what skills are required. Build a relationship with that person or with people. The more you get to know people, the more you ask questions, the more opportunity you may build for you to possibly move into something. I think that's one thing, that's a piece of advice I would give anybody in here is people love to talk about what they do. People love to talk about themselves. Build those relationships and take those opportunities and ask questions. Ask lots of questions. You can do that, and there is no such thing as a dumb question. And so use those opportunities to get to know people, and they'll think of you as opportunities arise.
And I would just say that, to just add to what you said, you need to look for opportunities outside of what you're very good at to grow. I mean, that's a given, right? So in most organizations, there are what I call as sort of the white spaces out there, right? Nobody has really defined what it is. There is a gap. There is an opportunity. Pursue that and And that's a great way to your point. And if you have a mentor who tells you, well, get involved, like where do you start, right? So look for that white space and start to fill in that space through, whether you put together a plan, whether you raise your hand to volunteer. I think that's important. But the other piece that you cannot overlook is finding a successor for what you do, right? In many cases, individuals tend to think that if you're the only one who knows about this work, your job is secure. Well, maybe in the short term it is, right? The long-term thinking is you don't want your job to hold you back or your skills to hold you back. You want to be able to find someone else who is able to take on what you do so you can do bigger things. So I think you need to look at it both ways, and it sounds like you're on the right track.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dahl Levant. I'm a native of Atlanta, Georgia. Left here, went to Harvard, been back a few years. Started a technology company, Aquagenuity, and we're doing pretty well and launching later this month with the United Nations. But I'm honored to be a part of this community. Alexis Rowe, one of your MBA students, invited me this morning, so I'm happy to be here. My question is, my personal philosophy is that personal development and business development are kind of the same thing, in the sense that you progress just as far as you've developed as an individual. So I'd love from all four of you, your best or favorite book recommendation in personal and possibly also in business.
Anyone wants to go with that?
There's a list of them. But I would say Lean In is a great book, and I know it's sort of, sure, Lean In, right? We all have read it, but it is one of those books where I thought that it really sort of highlighted the how, right? Not the what you need to do. And so that kind of comes to my mind right away.
Yeah, and I would say somebody that I've been following is Adam Grant at the Wharton School. He's got a monthly newsletter that he sends out, and he's always got something really interesting in there. He's written the book Originals. He's written the book Give and Take. And I find his insights really relevant and valuable.
And he wrote a book with Sheryl Sandberg as well.
Yes, that's right.
Option B.
That's right.
That's right.
Yes,
which is also.
That's right.
I have to put a plug in for Beyond Happy.
I was going to put a plug for that, but I'm glad you did that.
I mean, I will say that what I love most about my job is I teach positive leadership courses, and I get companies to hire me to teach this to their leaders. But and it's great because it is helping these leaders, I think, impact lives by making the workplace more positive. But what I also know and hear from the participants is that it changes their own lives. Because what I talk about in my classes and Beyond Happy is mindfulness and being present and focusing on the positive and meaning and things that can help you help others in the workplace. But you also gain a lot of insights that can help you in your personal life. So I agree with you. The development in the workplace and in your personal life go hand in hand, and I do think there's a lot from positive psychology that can be extremely useful in both the workplace and in our own lives.
For me, my field is digital and technology, so my reading is not as much about books, because by the time a book in this area is published, it's already too old. So I am on God knows how many newsletters that come to my mailbox. We talk about the latest and the biggest and the leading edge, not from a pure technological perspective, but what technology can do and accomplish, both positive and negative. So I'm constantly reading, try to keep up with that. And there are a lot of newsletters, email newsletters that you can, in the area of technology, if you go on the web. Actually, there are too many of them, but a few of them from MIT, for example, is very useful to read and to keep up with things. So that's the way and McKinsey is another one. So.
Good morning. Thank you for speaking with us. Yesterday, I was listening to the news after Elizabeth Warren ended her campaign, and there was a story about how the bar for being a good president is very low, but a bar for being a good president for a woman is quite high. And I was wondering if you've experienced that same sort of thing in your own careers and how you handled it, and if you might have advice for us.
I think the thing I would say is, my advice for you is know your stuff, prepare. And so when you're in those meetings, like Shali was talking about, you know, you're direct, you're fact-based, you don't make it personal, and people respect you for what you know. Have I experienced that? You know, I have had a lot of male support over the years, and so, you know, perhaps I have along the way, but I've also had people who were huge champions, and so I guess I tend to focus on that, and then if I do encounter any resistance, I'll prove them wrong. There's a stubbornness in me that kind of takes over. And so, yeah, I think the way I handle it is to be the best I can be and to bring the best of me to a problem and help an organization solve its problems. So I don't know if others have comments.
Yeah, I mean, that goes to, there are a lot of different biases, and Joan Williams has done a lot of work in this area, and she names different ones, and one of them is that men are judged on their potential and women are judged on their performance. So it is true that we have to prove ourselves like men don't, unfortunately. I mean, this is just a bias that we have to deal with. So that feeds into that, and you've said this, and I have to conclude with this, the importance of just doing the absolute best you can wherever you are at whatever moment you're at. And I agree with you that you don't know, this is a little off your question, but just advice in general. You have no idea what the next step is going to be. As much as we have a plan, I can promise you it's not going to go according to plan. And those opportunities come when you're successful. So something that I wish I had done more of was focus more on the moment. Again, not just the moment, but a little broader when you're, at what point are you in your career? And do that absolutely as best you can. And not worry so much about what's coming next, because those opportunities you can't even imagine. You don't know where you're going next, and those opportunities come from doing what you're doing now to your very best ability. So I think we do have to prove ourselves, unfortunately.
If I may add very quickly to that, because we're out of time, is this idea that yes, there are biases, and yes, there are unconscious biases. Don't focus on them. Don't let them distract you, you know, because they can, you know. Just try to stay positive and recognize those and shift your attention to things that are going well and they're positive, because those are things, the positive things are those that are going to motivate and sustain and energize you. Don't internalize negative things, okay? All right, this concludes our time, so let's thank our panels.
Thanks. Thank you.